Leaky gut is not a vague wellness trend or a fashionable diagnosis. It is a real, measurable physiological breakdown of the gut lining, and it is now one of the most common drivers of chronic illness I see in clinical practice. Your gut wall is supposed to function as a tight, intelligent barrier, selecting what enters your bloodstream and what stays out. When that lining becomes inflamed, irritated, or injured, the junctions between the cells loosen. Suddenly, substances that were never meant to enter your circulation, bacterial fragments, toxins, partially digested food proteins, begin leaking through. This is the moment the body shifts into alarm mode. Once these foreign particles slip into the bloodstream, the immune system does exactly what it is designed to do. It attacks. But that immune activation triggers widespread inflammation, and the effects ripple far beyond the gut. Energy levels plummet as the mitochondria become collateral damage. Hormones fall out of balance because chronic inflammation disrupts cortisol rhythms, thyroid function, and insulin sensitivity. The brain becomes inflamed, producing fog, anxiety, and poor focus. Even the skin reacts because inflammation pushes toxins outward when the gut can't keep them contained. Metabolism slows, cravings intensify, and stubborn weight becomes harder to shift. What makes this condition so frustrating is that it is both extremely common and routinely overlooked. Conventional medicine often treats symptoms in isolations, skin here, fatigue there, hormones separately, without recognizing that all these issues share a single upstream cause, a compromised gut wall. Many people spend years treating the downstream consequences but never address the root. And this is precisely why healing the gut becomes the foundation for restoring long-term health. When you repair the barrier, reduce inflammation, and re-establish proper immune signaling, the entire system begins to recalibrate. The gut lining is one of the most metabolically active, highly defended, and strategically designed tissues in the human body. It must perform an extraordinarily complex role, digesting and absorbing nutrients while simultaneously keeping out the vast array of microbes, toxins, and foreign proteins that pass through the digestive tract every day. To achieve this, the gut wall is built from a single layer of epithelial cells, held together by tight junctions of protein structures that act like intelligent gatekeepers. When functioning properly, these junctions open and close with exquisite precision, allowing nutrients through while preventing anything harmful from entering the bloodstream. Overlying this epithelial layer is the mucosal barrier, a sticky, immunologically active layer rich in antibodies, enzymes, and beneficial bacteria. This mucus acts like a biological shield, neutralizing pathogens and reducing frictional damage to the epithelial surface. Leaky gut occurs when these protective systems become damaged or overwhelmed. Inflammatory foods, alcohol, infections, medications, chronic stress, and environmental toxins can erode the mucosal barrier, leaving the epithelial cells exposed. The tight junctions then begin to loosen under the influence of inflammatory mediators such as zonulin, cytokines, and oxidative stress. As these junctions widen, the one selective barrier becomes porous. Instead of allowing only small, fully digested nutrients through, the gut now permits a stream of biologically active intruders, bacterial endotoxins, lipopolysaccharides, pathogenic fragments, and partially digested food proteins, to leak directly into the bloodstream. Once these substances enter systemic circulation, the immune system immediately identifies them as threats. This initiates a chain reaction of immune activation. Antibodies form against food proteins, inflammatory cytokines surge, and mast cells release histamine. The body becomes locked in a state of continuous surveillance, as though facing a chronic infection. This ongoing immune stimulation creates what I describe as metabolic fire, a persistent, low-grade inflammatory burden that drains mitochondrial energy and disrupts normal cellular function. Over time, the mitochondria struggle to keep up with the increased energy demands of chronic inflammation, leaving patients fatigued, foggy, and unable to recover properly after exertion. The effects of leaky gut are not confined to digestion. They ripple through every major body system. In the endocrine system, inflammation interferes with insulin signaling, promoting insulin resistance and making weight control more difficult. The thyroid becomes less efficient, slowing metabolism. Cortisol secretion becomes dysregulated, leading to adrenal strain, poor stress tolerance, and sleep disturbances. In the brain, inflammatory molecules cross the blood-brain barrier, altering neurotransmitter balance and contributing to anxiety, depression, and cognitive difficulties. The skin becomes a secondary detox organ, and conditions such as eczema, acne, and rosacea often flare because the body is attempting to expel inflammatory byproducts. What is particularly concerning is that the modern lifestyle fuels this cycle relentlessly. Highly processed diets, chronic stress, alcohol, antibiotics, pesticides, and disrupted sleep patterns all push the gut barrier toward permeability. The result is an epidemic of symptoms: fatigue, bloating, autoimmune issues, brain fog, hormonal fluctuations, weight gain, that appear unrelated on the surface, but share the same underlying mechanism: systemic inflammation originating from a compromised gut wall. Patients often bounce from specialist to specialist, each addressing a single symptom cluster, while the true root cause goes untreated. Mainstream medicine has been slow to acknowledge leaky gut, largely because it doesn't fit neatly into conventional diagnostic frameworks. Standard blood tests rarely detect it, and the symptoms are diffuse and multisystemic, making it easy to misattribute them to stress or aging. Yet the physiology is clear, the mechanisms are well described, and the clinical evidence from thousands of patients is undeniable. When the gut barrier breaks down, the body enters a state of chronic inflammatory stress. Repairing that barrier is one of the most powerful interventions for restoring long-term health, stabilizing immunity, improving metabolic function, and reducing the inflammatory load that underlies so many modern chronic conditions. Many people assume that if they do not have obvious digestive problems, their gut must be fine. This is one of the greatest misconceptions in modern health. Leaky gut is rarely confined to the digestive tract because once the gut lining becomes permeable, the resulting inflammation spreads system-wide. The symptoms that follow often appear unrelated, scattered across different organs and systems, which is why they are so frequently misdiagnosed. In reality, they are different expressions of the same upstream mechanism: immune activation triggered by gut-derived toxins and food proteins entering the bloodstream. One of the earliest and most overlooked signs is fatigue. When the immune system is constantly switched on, the mitochondria divert energy toward defense rather than daily metabolic needs. This produces what patients describe as feeling tired for no reason, struggling to recover after exertion, or waking unrefreshed despite adequate sleep. Brain fog follows a similar pattern. Inflammatory molecules such as cytokines easily cross the blood-brain barrier, disrupting neurotransmitter balance, slowing cognitive processing, and interfering with memory. Many patients assume they are simply stressed or aging, when the real culprit is inflammatory signaling originating in the gut. Skin issues are another hallmark of leaky gut, even when digestion feels normal. The skin often becomes a secondary elimination organ when the gut barrier is compromised. Conditions such as eczema, acne, rosacea, hives, and unexplained rashes often flare because inflammatory metabolites are being pushed outward. Histamine intolerance is common as mast cells become hyper-responsive to the constant immune stimulation. Similarly, joint pain and musculoskeletal stiffness frequently stem from systemic inflammation rather than structural injury. Cytokines and immune complexes deposit in joint tissues, creating pain, swelling, or that persistent morning stiffness many people dismiss as part of getting older. Hormonal imbalance is also closely tied to gut permeability. Inflammation disrupts insulin signaling, leading to cravings, blood sugar swings, and difficulty losing weight. Women may experience worsening PMS, irregular cycles, or symptoms of estrogen dominance, while men may see a drop in testosterone and reduced vitality. Thyroid function is particularly vulnerable because inflammatory stress reduces the conversion of T4 to active T3, leaving patients hypothyroid on a cellular level, even if standard blood tests look normal. This is one of the main reasons individuals with leaky gut often report cold hands and feet, low energy, slow metabolism, and stubborn weight gain. Food sensitivities are another subtle but telling sign. As the gut becomes more permeable, the immune system is exposed to large, partially digested food proteins. Over time, the body begins mounting immune responses to foods that were previously tolerated, often causing bloating, headaches, mood changes, or fatigue hours after eating. These sensitivities are not random. They reflect ongoing immune activation at the gut level. Autoimmune conditions can also develop against this backdrop. When the immune system is chronically provoked, the risk of mistaken identity increases, leading the body to attack its own tissues. This is why autoimmune diseases so often coexist with gut dysfunction. Mood disturbances are equally common. The gut and brain communicate continuously via the vagus nerve, inflammatory cytokines, and neurotransmitters produced by gut bacteria. When the gut is inflamed, serotonin production drops, cortisol levels fluctuate, and the nervous system becomes more reactive. Anxiety, depression, irritability, and poor stress tolerance frequently appear long before digestive symptoms do. Some patients also notice recurring infections or slow recovery from illness, reflecting weakened immune resilience due to ongoing inflammatory burden. What makes leaky gut particularly challenging is how differently it can present in different people. In some, it appears primarily as fatigue and brain fog. In others, it is skin problems or hormonal chaos. In another group, it manifests as recurring infections or unexplained joint pain. The pattern depends on individual vulnerabilities, genetic predispositions, stress levels, toxin exposures, hormonal status, and lifestyle factors. But the common thread is always the same: a compromised gut barrier triggering immune and inflammatory responses throughout the body. This is why leaky gut must be recognized as a whole body inflammatory condition rather than a localized digestive problem. The gut is the command center for immunity, metabolism, and inflammatory regulation. When its barrier fails, the entire system becomes destabilized. Many patients who feel mysteriously unwell are not suffering from a dozen different unrelated conditions. They are experiencing the downstream consequences of a single, highly fixable root cause. Leaky gut does not appear out of nowhere. It develops predictably when the gut is exposed to chronic irritation, poor nutrition, and environmental stressors that exceed the body's capacity to repair itself. The gut lining is a living tissue that replaces itself every few days, but that regeneration depends on stable blood sugar, anti-inflammatory nutrients, a balanced microbiome, and minimal toxic load. When these conditions are absent, the gut barrier begins to fail. The modern lifestyle unfortunately creates the perfect storm for this breakdown. One of the primary culprits is the highly processed, sugar-rich diet that now dominates Western eating patterns. Sugar feeds inflammatory microbes and fuels yeast overgrowth, both of which erode the mucosal barrier. High glycemic spikes also increase zonulin, a protein that directly loosens tight junctions. Processed foods introduce emulsifiers, preservatives, and artificial additives that disrupt the mucus layer and increase epithelial stress. Seed oils, particularly those high in omega-6 linoleic acid, promote oxidative stress and lipid peroxidation in the gut wall, creating a more inflammatory environment that weakens cellular integrity. Gluten poses a specific problem for genetically susceptible individuals because it triggers zonulin release, widening tight junctions and allowing larger food proteins to leak into circulation. Even in those without overt gluten intolerance, modern wheat is far more inflammatory than its ancestral varieties and often aggravates the gut lining. Alcohol is another significant irritant, directly thinning the mucosal barrier and increasing intestinal permeability even in moderate drinkers. Alcohol also disrupts the microbial ecosystem, allowing harmful bacteria to proliferate. The microbiome plays a crucial role in maintaining gut health. Beneficial bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids, such as butyrate, which strengthen epithelial cells and support tight junction function. When dysbiosis develops, whether from diet, alcohol, antibiotics, or stress, the gut wall loses one of its main sources of nourishment. Chronic stress is equally destructive. The gut and brain communicate constantly through the vagus nerve, hormones, and immune messengers. Under prolonged stress, cortisol rises, blood flow to the gut decreases, and digestive enzymes drop. These changes impair digestion, alter microbial balance, and weaken tight junctions. Stress also increases intestinal permeability by upregulating inflammatory cytokines and reducing mucus production. This is why stressful periods often coincide with flare-ups of skin issues, fatigue, or food sensitivities. Poor sleep compounds these effects. During deep sleep, the gut performs much of its repair work. When sleep is fragmented or insufficient, regenerative processes slow, leaving the gut more vulnerable to daily insults. Medications are another major, often overlooked cause. Non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs such as ibuprofen directly damage the epithelial lining. Proton pump inhibitors reduce stomach acid, impairing proper digestion and allowing larger food particles to reach the intestine. Antibiotics, while sometimes necessary, indiscriminately kill bacteria and can devastate the microbiome for months, leaving the gut unprotected. Repeated antibiotic courses are a major driver of long-term dysbiosis, candida overgrowth, and chronic gut permeability. Infections, whether bacterial, viral, parasitic, or fungal, can also erode the gut lining. Pathogens release toxins, trigger inflammation, and destabilize the microbiome. Many people develop lingering gut issues after a bout of food poisoning or stomach flu because the infection weakens the epithelial layer, and the gut never fully repairs without targeted support. Environmental toxins, including pesticides, heavy metals, plastics, and mold toxins, add yet another layer of stress. These compounds disrupt the microbiome, increase oxidative stress, and impair the body's detoxification pathways. Over time, the cumulative burden overwhelms the gut barrier. A final and critical factor is nutrient deficiency. The gut lining requires specific nutrients, zinc, vitamin A, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, glutamine, and polyphenols, to maintain its structure and repair damage. When the diet lacks these building blocks, the epithelial cells simply cannot regenerate at the required pace. Modern diets, dominated by processed foods and low in minerals and antioxidants, leave the gut chronically undernourished. When viewed through this lens, leaky gut becomes entirely predictable. If the body is repeatedly exposed to irritants, deprived of sleep, placed under chronic stress, or fed nutritionally empty foods, the gut barrier will fail. If the microbiome is disrupted by medications or toxins, the gut lining loses its protective allies, and if the nutrients required for repair are absent, healing cannot occur. The combination of these factors creates a physiological environment where permeability is not an anomaly. It is the expected result. When the gut barrier becomes permeable, the consequences extend far beyond digestive discomfort. The leak of microbial toxins, food proteins, and inflammatory molecules into the bloodstream triggers a biological chain reaction that disrupts hormonal balance, immune regulation, mitochondrial function, and metabolic stability. This is why symptoms that seem unrelated, fatigue, irregular periods, weight gain, anxiety, skin flare-up, so often share the same upstream cause. Once the gut becomes inflamed, the entire hormonal and metabolic network begins to destabilize. A primary target is cortisol, the body's stress response hormone. When bacterial endotoxins such as lipopolysaccharides enter circulation, the immune system responds with a surge of pro-inflammatory cytokines. These cytokines stimulate cortisol release as the body attempts to dampen inflammation. Over time, this constant cortisol demand leads to dysregulation. Initially, cortisol may run high, contributing to anxiety, poor sleep, irritability, and blood sugar swings. Eventually, the adrenal system fatigues and cortisol drops, leaving people feeling exhausted, unable to handle stress, and prone to crashes after minimal exertion. This hormonal imbalance alone explains much of the wired but tired pattern seen in chronic inflammatory states. Insulin is similarly affected. Inflammation impairs insulin receptor sensitivity, making it harder for cells to take up glucose. As insulin resistance develops, blood sugar becomes erratic, cravings intensify, and the body stores more fat, particularly visceral fat around the abdomen. Many individuals believe they are overeating or aging, when in reality, the inflammatory load from a leaky gut is blocking proper glucose metabolism. This is why weight gain becomes stubborn. The metabolic machinery is being chemically disrupted, not simply overwhelmed by calories. The thyroid is another casualty of gut-derived inflammation. Inflammatory cytokines interfere with the conversion of T4 into T3, the active thyroid hormone responsible for metabolic rate, energy production, temperature regulation, and brain clarity. Even if thyroid blood tests appear normal, low cellular T3 leads to fatigue, cold intolerance, hair thinning, constipation, slowed metabolism, and difficulty losing weight. Additionally, about 70% of the immune system resides in the gut. When permeability increases, the immune response becomes chaotic, increasing the likelihood of autoimmune thyroid conditions such as Hashimoto's. Patients often experience years of symptoms before anyone connects them back to the gut. Sex hormones also become destabilized. Chronic inflammation increases aromatase activity, the enzyme that converts testosterone into estrogen. In women, this may manifest as estrogen dominance, worsening PMS, heavy periods, fibroids, and cyclical mood changes. In men, it can lead to reduced testosterone, lower energy, decreased muscle tone, and mood instability. In both sexes, elevated inflammation disrupts progesterone balance, contributing to anxiety, sleep problems, and poor stress resilience. These hormonal shifts do not develop in isolation. They reflect the body's attempt to cope with ongoing inflammatory strain originating in the gut lining. Mitochondrial function is especially vulnerable. Endotoxins and inflammatory molecules damage mitochondrial membranes, impairing the production of ATP, the energy currency of the body. As mitochondrial output drops, individuals feel fatigued, mentally foggy, and less capable of physical exertion. This is not simple tiredness. It is a metabolic shutdown triggered by immune activation. The muscles become less efficient, the brain processes information more slowly, and recovery after activity becomes prolonged. Mood and cognitive function are shaped directly by gut permeability. Inflammation alters neurotransmitter production, decreases serotonin availability, and increases excitatory signaling in the brain. Many experience anxiety, low mood, irritability, or difficulty concentrating. These are biochemical effects, not character flaws or purely psychological issues. The brain is inflamed because the gut barrier is compromised. The immune system also shifts into chronic activation. Instead of responding to distinct threats, it remains on high alert, producing ongoing inflammation that taxes the body's resources. Over time, this can lead to hypersensitivity reactions, increased allergies, and even autoimmune disease. When the immune system is bombarded with foreign particles leaking from the gut, it becomes more likely to misidentify the body's own tissues as threats. All of these processes together create whole body dysfunction. The skin flares because toxins escape through the epidermis. The metabolism stalls because the mitochondria are under attack. Hormones fall out of balance because inflammation interferes with signaling pathways. Anxiety and poor focus develop because inflammatory molecules alter brain chemistry. The downstream symptoms appear scattered, but the root cause is unified, a permeable gut wall allowing immune triggering substances into circulation. Understanding these mechanisms gives individuals clarity. Treating isolated symptoms will never resolve the problem if the underlying trigger, gut permeability, is left unaddressed. Healing a leaky gut begins by understanding that the gut lining is a dynamic, regenerating tissue that responds directly to the inputs you give it, both beneficial and harmful. The process is not vague or mysterious. It is grounded in very predictable physiology. When you remove irritants, calm inflammation, nourish the microbiome, rebuild the mucosal barrier, and support digestion, the gut lining repairs itself. These 5 steps form the foundation of restoring gut integrity and reversing the systemic symptoms driven by permeability. The first step is removing irritants. You cannot heal a tissue that is constantly being injured. Processed foods, sugars, alcohol, seed oils, and ultra-refined carbohydrates produce oxidative stress and inflammation in the gut wall. Gluten can trigger zonulin release in susceptible individuals, widening tight junctions. Artificial sweeteners and additives alter the microbiome and erode the mucus layer. NSAIDs and certain medications damage epithelial cells. The aim here is not perfection. It is eliminating the most consistent sources of injury. A whole food, anti-inflammatory diet rich in vegetables, clean proteins, and natural fats gives the gut a chance to stop defending itself and begin repairing. Removing irritants is the single most powerful upstream intervention because it prevents continued harm. The second step is lowering inflammation. A gut that is inflamed cannot seal. Chronic inflammation is fueled by endotoxins leaking into the bloodstream, but also by the foods and habits that keep the immune system on alert. Omega-3 fats from fish or flax reduce cytokine production. Polyphenols in berries, herbs, and green tea act as antioxidants. Spices like turmeric and ginger help modulate inflammatory pathways. Even something as simple as stabilizing blood sugar reduces immune activation. Lifestyle factors matter just as much. Chronic stress drives cortisol disruption, and cortisol directly influences gut permeability. Incorporating breathing exercises, walks outside, or short meditative practices helps lower inflammatory signaling and improves vagal tone, which is essential for gut repair. The third step is feeding beneficial bacteria. The microbiome is not optional, it is essential. Beneficial bacteria produce short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, which fuel the epithelial cells lining the colon and tighten the junctions between them. Without this microbial support, the gut wall becomes thin and fragile. A diverse, fiber-rich diet is the most reliable way to feed these bacteria. Soluble fiber from vegetables, fruits, and seeds provides the raw material for microbial fermentation. Resistant starch from cooked and cooled potatoes, rice, or green bananas supports butyrate production. Fermented foods such as sauerkraut, kefir, and yogurt help reintroduce beneficial strains. For some, probiotics can be helpful, but they work best when combined with adequate fiber. The goal is to cultivate a stable microbial ecosystem that actively defends the gut barrier. The fourth step is repairing the mucosal lining. This protective mucus layer functions like the gut's first line of defense, shielding the epithelial cells from friction, pathogens, and toxins. When it becomes thin or disrupted, the gut wall is directly exposed. Specific nutrients help rebuild this layer. Bone broth contains collagen and amino acids like glycine and proline that support tissue repair. Glutamine is a primary fuel for intestinal cells and helps restore epithelial integrity. Zinc carnosine supports mucosal healing and reduces inflammation. Aloe, slippery elm, marshmallow root, and Digia licoris help soothe and coat the gut lining. When these nutrients are added consistently, the mucosal barrier thickens and becomes more resilient, reducing both permeability and inflammatory activation. The fifth step is restoring digestive strength. Proper digestion is essential to preventing the inflow of large, partially digested food particles, the very substances that trigger immune reactions when they leak into circulation. Low stomach acid, sluggish bile flow, and inadequate pancreatic enzymes all contribute to incomplete digestion. Supporting stomach acid with apple cider vinegar or betaine HCl when appropriate helps break down proteins more efficiently. Bitters stimulate bile production and enzyme release. Chewing food thoroughly and eating without distraction improves mechanical digestion. For individuals with significant digestive weakness, temporary use of digestive enzymes can be extremely supportive. When digestion is strong, fewer inflammatory particles reach the intestine in the first place, reducing the total immune load. Each of these steps works synergistically. Removing irritants stops new damage. Lowering inflammation allows healing pathways to activate. Feeding beneficial bacteria restores microbial balance. Repairing the mucosal layer rebuilds the barrier itself. Improving digestion reduces the burden on the gut wall. When implemented together, these interventions shift the gut from a state of constant defense to one of regeneration. The gut lining begins sealing. Symptoms such as fatigue, bloating, skin issues, and hormonal instability stabilize, and the body gradually moves back toward equilibrium. Healing a leaky gut follows a predictable pattern once the irritants are removed and the gut is given the raw materials it needs to regenerate. But this process is not linear. It unfolds in phases, and understanding what to expect helps people stay committed long enough to see meaningful results. The gut lining can begin repairing within days, but full restoration of the mucosal barrier, microbial balance, and immune stability may take weeks to months, depending on the severity of the damage and the patient's overall health. What matters most is consistency, not perfection. In the earliest phase, typically the first 2 to 10 days, many individuals notice subtle but encouraging improvements. Bloating decreases, bowel movements become more regular, and energy becomes slightly more stable. Cravings often diminish as blood sugar stabilizes and inflammatory signaling begins to quiet down. Some also report clearer skin or reduced headaches very early because the inflammatory load starts to lighten. However, this initial phase may also bring mild adjustment effects. When irritants are removed and the microbiome shifts, some people experience temporary symptoms such as fatigue, loose stools, skin flares, or mild headaches. This reflects the body processing inflammatory waste, adjusting digestive enzymes, and rebalancing microbial populations. These effects are not setbacks. They are signs that the internal environment is changing. As healing progresses over the next 4 to 8 weeks, the gut lining thickens, tight junctions strengthen, and inflammatory markers gradually reduce. This is when many of the more stubborn symptoms begin to shift. Fatigue lessens as mitochondrial stress decreases. Mood becomes more stable as inflammatory cytokines drop and serotonin production improves. Hormonal symptoms begin stabilizing because cortisol, insulin, and thyroid hormones are no longer being disrupted by endotoxin in leakage. Skin conditions often improve because the body no longer needs to push toxins through the skin as a backup elimination route. Weight becomes easier to manage as insulin sensitivity stabilizes. These changes are physiological and expected once systemic inflammation reduces. By the 3 to 6 month mark, the gut lining is substantially stronger, provided that irritants have remained removed and supportive nutrients have been consistent. This is when long-standing issues such as autoimmune flares, recurrent infections, and hormonal imbalances often show significant improvement. The immune system becomes less reactive, food sensitivities decrease, and digestion becomes far more predictable. Sleep quality increases because cortisol rhythm stabilizes. Many people report feeling like themselves again as mental clarity, motivation, and emotional resilience return. This phase represents true physiological repair, not merely symptom suppression. Maintaining these gains long-term requires building habits that protect the gut rather than returning to the patterns that cause the damage. A whole food, anti-inflammatory diet remains the foundation. Vegetables, clean proteins, healthy fats, fiber-rich foods, herbs, and polyphenols all work together to maintain gut lining integrity. Diversity is key because different fibers feed different microbial species. Rotating plant foods, incorporating fermented foods, and occasionally adding resistant starch help keep the microbiome resilient. Avoiding chronic sugar intake, seed oils, highly processed foods, and excessive alcohol prevents the slow erosion of the mucosal barrier from beginning again. Daily habits also play a critical role. Chronic stress is one of the fastest ways to reopen a healed gut. Supporting the vagus nerve through deep breathing, morning sunlight, walking, gentle exercise, or simply eating meals without distraction helps maintain proper gut motility, enzyme secretion, and microbial balance. Sleep remains a non-negotiable pillar. The gut performs most of its repair work at night, and inconsistent sleep patterns quickly destabilize the barrier. Hydration supports mucus production, bile flow, and cellular repair. Even simple actions like chewing food thoroughly reduce the digestive burden on the gut. Environmental detoxification is another layer of long-term maintenance. Reducing exposure to pesticides, plastics, mold, and household chemicals lowers the toxic load on the liver and gut. Choosing filtered water, storing food in glass, and improving ventilation in the home all contribute to creating a healthier internal environment. Even moderate improvements here reduce oxidative stress and help preserve the integrity of the gut lining. Perhaps the most important mindset shift is recognizing that gut health is not a temporary project, but a lifelong foundation. A strong gut lining protects every system: energy stability, hormonal balance, immune function, mood regulation, metabolic resilience, and long-term disease prevention all depend on it. Once people experience the clarity, vitality, and stability that come from a sealed gut barrier, they rarely want to go back. The goal is not rigid perfection. It is cultivating a lifestyle that consistently supports the body's natural capacity to repair, defend, and thrive.